they needed to fix some of the vinyl. So what did the workers do? They basically removed some of the through bolts, fixed the window and the vinyl, and then they put the fire escape back, and they put some latch screws where there used to be through bolts on one side. And when there was a fireworks display on July 4th and 3 kids went up there, what do you think occurred when they went to get a better vantage point of the fireworks? It went boom, boom, boom to the ground. We went to they put all the pieces in a secured location, which was basically a lot that the guy owned down the street, and they threw all the pieces in a lot. And we found the smoking gun. So even though they didn't properly secure the evidence, when we got there, now this is all lawyers and fire officials and building officials all walking this grassy knoll here. And what do we find? Because they asked to secure the evidence, and they did. They threw it in a field somewhere that the guy owned down the street. The smoking gun, guys. They put a lag screw, a half-inch lag screw in a half-inch hole. And what does that do for security? It's stability. Got it? So they put it back with through bolts, and they were so unsure of themselves, they also put a leg to the ground on top of the roof. On top of a pressure-treated sleeper, or right onto the roof asphalt and shingles. This metal pole. Right? So, live load testing. Let's talk about live load testing. You guys see this all the time in a lot of your buildings that are now non-smoking buildings. What's the new designated smoking area, guys? Fire escapes. You guys remember this? Whenever there's a parade, whenever there's anything, sometimes paramedics, for some reason, can't get somebody out. Where do they pull them out from? By the way, guys, as you can see there's a guy working on a fire escape. Fire escapes kill everybody. One of our guys out of Chicago, his dad, 57 years old, fell 7 stories to his death, touching the wrong bolt, well, pulling the wrong connection. So guess who eats? It has no discretion. It'll kill anybody. So tenants, firemen, workers, all get killed on fire escapes. Who inspects fire escapes? Law's very clear, it's right in there. Design professionals or others acceptable to the building official. So if you have an expertise in fire escapes, or that instructions, fire protection engineer or something like that, and you have somebody come to your office and say, hey, this is what I do, let me prove to you what I do. Otherwise, guaranteed that you must accept, whether they're incompetent or not, is design professionals. So if a structural engineer or anybody with an engineer comes in, a lot of times you have to accept them. Architects, landscape architects have signed off on these things. Why? Because the code is too vague. You should be working with structural engineers and others acceptable to the building official. Got it? Who else? So in the code it says engineers are acceptable, architects are acceptable, fire escape. Oh, by the way, sometimes they think you guys are inspecting their fire escape because they come and say, hey, the guy was here. He told me to fix one tread. That's it. How much to fix that one tread? Because that's all he wrote the violation on. We're like, no, he wants the whole guy. No, they hang up on you. Because what are they looking for? The guy that listens to them and says, I want you to come, give me an evaluation on one rail bolt, one tread bolt, and then say it's fine so I can get this city official off my back. There's also fire escape inspectors. Guys, I founded the National Fire Escape Association 2 years ago because I had so much data that I had to put it somewhere. So that's all it is. It's my own personal library of information. But you know there's only 2 licenses in the whole country? I have a rank 4 license out of the state of California, LA. So if you guys want to copy a great system where they charge me $1,000 to get my license, I go through 100 question tests. Well, not just me, every sprinkler guy, every alarm guy, every fire protection has to be licensed, and we have to pay our license every 3 years, guys. You know what I'm saying? So if you want a system, LA's got it down to a science. So there's fire escape, and I have a Boston license. And my flaw with the Boston license is that the G3 Act, not only can I fix my stuff, inspect the stuff, I can sign off on this stuff. Any is it chicken in the hen house issues? Tell anybody. So here you have investigations by engineers. So just because you have an engineer, sometimes you get a one-piece paper that says the fire escape needs a couple things done. This fire escape in your estimation, pass or fail? Right? The engineer that wrote the violation, the engineer that wrote the write-up, wrote a one-pager on this. And this is the one-pager. He says, fix something on the third floor, fix something on the second floor, give it a paint job and I'll sign off on it. But at the very bottom, isn't there a little disclaimer? You can't read it because it's kind of small, but guess what it says? To the best of my information, knowledge, belief. So is it an evaluation or is it an opinion affidavit? It's an eyeball test, right? Now you can see the photographs next to it. I failed the fire escape. Thank God it was white because all the red shows up really, really good. Those are all fails. There's another one I did in Chicago, 150 units. And I got this one-page letter, and the guy wanted a price. Guess what? Fix it or paint it. They just wanted a paint job. I said, well, no problem, I'll give you a price to paint it. And I do my own walkthrough just to make sure that everything is good. So when I walk through it, because I said the only thing it needs is some painting. So is this painting? This is the same fire escape. Is that painting? Now when I brought this to the attention of the management company, guess what they said? When I brought it to the building department, guess what they said? Well, we rely on the engineer. If an engineer wants to put his license on the line and blah, 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 that kind of comes. I just need a piece of paper to stick in the file. Now, can you take that same piece of paper and bring it out when you got a dead fireman and give that piece of paper to his family? Say, hey, I hope this will help you feel better, but there was an engineer's piece of paper here that maybe you can bring to the bank, right? Because if they have that disclaimer on it that says, to the best of my information, knowledge, and belief, what is that? The golden escape parachute? Now, we were involved in Chicago in a lawsuit, but I was on the other side. One of the pieces of a fire escape that we dealt with came up because a masonry company was using it to work with and smashing that cantilever 5 to 10 times a day to go up and down. A piece broke off and hit one of their guys in the head. Guess what that guy did? Who'd he sue? Everybody. Everybody got wet. So over 7 people in the lawsuit, including Chicago. Now, when we were sitting in deposition, this took all 7 years. And guess what they try to blame? The guy who touched the fire escape. Guess who touched the fire escape? Guess what the city of, we did a total refurb on the job. This was a weld that we changed our policy on welds, which I'll talk to you guys about this afterwards. And basically, it gave us all the information that we're sharing with you today that says, listen, if you accept an opinion, can you be dragged into a court case? The law says test or other evidence of strength. They didn't give you that. They gave you an opinion affidavit. They neither tested it nor gave you any other evidence of strength. They gave you an opinion and you accept it. Like Chicago did. What happened? You're involved in the lawsuit. Got it? Because the code didn't say, you know, low test, other evidence of strength, or a friendly opinion. Did anybody have a friendly opinion amended to that thing? So if you don't have friendly opinion amended on there, you want what codes say that? Well, the IFC, IBC, NFPA, and what do they all say? The authority having jurisdiction. So who calls the load test? The engineer, the architect? Who calls for the load test? The authority having jurisdiction. So you guys, like I said, you guys know, you knew this, but you didn't know this. So the authority having jurisdiction shall accept by load test or other evidence of strength. You're always going for the other evidence of strength, but when somebody bullies you for any reason, what do you pull out of your pocket? When you got somebody with more credentials than you have, and they built some skyscraper in downtown. What do you tell that engineer that's trying to bully you into taking his opinion on his letterhead? Show me. He's not going to show you the load test. You have to prepare for it. You have to tell you how it's going to be done. There's a whole process in showing you what the load test criteria is going to be. You have the right to witness it. So whenever you're getting bullied around, you basically pull out the 3 codes. They've always been there. These have not changed. So all these code changes, All these codes are still in 2009, 2011, 2015, 2017. They're not going to play the fire escape codes. We get two lines in the whole book. They've never changed this in 100 years. You just never read that under the maintenance you're supposed to have a load test. You had a load test card. Not the you're not supposed to ask an engineer what's your opinion. You think I should load test it? It says right there, the authority having jurisdiction to review. This is a detention center for juveniles. So when I walked up to it, I found this underneath. So if your 6-month sentence or your 17-month sentence doesn't get you, what could get you? All the fire escape people falling. When we go up a fire escape, one of the things we have is a 3-pound hammer. Now that is not part of the load testing. That is a safety test to make sure that we can physically walk up the fire escape safely. So if you ever want to see what it looks like when you go up a bad fire escape, unless you want to start carrying around little ping hammers, 3-pound little baby sledges, right? Because some of the rust is 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. So next time you walk up fire escape and you're about to fight the fire, bring a hammer with you and do this. I think that's it, yeah. Okay guys, let's fight the fire. I think that's it. So what this is a ping, we call it a ping pong test. So if I'm going up a fire escape, when I hit it, and even though it might have some rust in it, but it's solid because I got something left of the shaft, what's it going to ring like? It's going to ring like a ping. When I've got rust in there, the shaft is gone and it's compressing it because of rust expansion is what's holding it there. And I hit it, I get a thud, it goes so pong. So when we go up to inspect the fire escape for our own safety, not as part of the examination as far as a load test of any kind, it's ping, ping, pong. As soon as we hit a pong, we knock it down and then we identify it with spray or we identify it with a small little yellow tag of tape. I want to get to this one right away, but how many of you have ever trained on a fire tower? What? The room got really quiet and I don't think it's the apple pie. So it's funny because every time I go to every state, we got all these cities that are just non-compliant, and then when I ask the fire prevention to take me to the training facility so I can look at their fire towers, guess what happens? So I show up there, and as you know, the outside part of it is for you guys to train. The inside part, you guys throw, hay and all kinds of things to create smoke, and you're constantly bombarding the inside with water. Guess what it does to the inside staircase that is fire resistant? All right. So when you look at it, right, I started ping-ponging the thing, and I shut this tower down like I do many towers, because guess what happens? Men have been running up and down this thing the day before. And I ping-ponged the thing and I shut it down that day. So both inside and outside, these fire towers are doing what? So what's going to kill you? The actual fire or training for an actual fire is going to get you hurt? So this is some more rust. This is how heavy rust can get. You let rust grow. This right here is in a veteran's home. This is fire escapes on a veteran's home. Most of these guys were 70 to 90 years old. Trash trucks, cement trucks that are 12 to 14 feet high. What do you think they do to this stuff? In alleyways. Housing complexes. Now this is important. That one right there, that building right there, that's actually City Hall. And look at in the middle stairs. Look at all the dangling stairs at City Hall. All right. So schools. You guys know that when you do a fire drill and you have an old school building, and if you have a charter school and they use old buildings that used to be office space and such, in your fire drill, you're supposed to go to the nearest exit. You know how many times they use the fire escape during their fire drills? Never. It's a good thing. But that's because they know what's going to happen. They're not only going to scare the kids to death on these things, but they don't want to test because a lot of these fire escapes at charter schools and old schools and how many colleges have these beautiful old mansions that they've spent 50 grand on the marble floor on the foyer when you walk in, and when you tell them to spend 10 grand on the fire escape, what do they look at you and say? You're crazy, right? And it's the fire escape on a lot of the older dorms, a lot of the older buildings that are still making part of that, because they're all historically preserved now, and they'll spend $1 million renovating the inside. They won't spend a nickel on the fire escape. And currently, there's no way to put another staircase inside that building because the historical preservation won't let you. Speaking of that, while we're on the hysterical committee, is there anybody from the hysterical committee? They now say that you got a 10-story, 20-story building, and you've gutted the inside, new stairs, new elevators inside, and what do they want you to keep on the outside? The fire escape. Because it's part of the look, you know. So now you got this rotten piece of steel that they won't let you take off the building because you've met the requirements inside, because it's part of the look of the outside. So there's an answer there, yes?
I have a question for you. You're talking about the sororities and fraternities. You see a lot of them with the fire escapes, the old houses now. Is it still legal to put those on as a second means?
Sure.
Okay, so you can still do it today?
Yes.
Okay.
Any existing building, if you want to save it, otherwise you will be ripping down buildings that are beautiful buildings. A fire escape is the final answer. It will answer any and all means of egress. So you take a mansion that is ready to be knocked down, that somebody wants to buy, but turn it into 4 apartments, 4 condos, rooming houses, or whatever it may be. The safe way to do it is that they will attach and pick up every single window, every single system with an external fire escape system, and no ladders. And that building will have another 50 years of life. Because that's just natural. This, you know, otherwise knock the thing down. No doctor is going to buy a money pit and put a bunch of money into it for 25% of the value. He can build a brand new mansion somewhere else. You know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of buildings that is its second life, and a fire escape can answer. I mean, I've got factories where fire escapes are the answer. Barns where the fire escape is the answer. Basically, you need to get people from the 2nd floor, the 3rd floor down to the ground, and you can squeeze a fire escape anywhere on the back of a building, on the side of a building. And don't fight the fire escapes, because they will make buildings last another 50 years. Yes.
Who builds fire escapes?
Ornamental ironwork guys. So ornamental ironwork guys, welding guys, as long as somebody draws it up, and so it's not something you can't build anymore. Nobody built them anymore. So we're the last fire escape company in the nation, but we're not the only ones that can build fire escapes. So you still have ornamental ironwork guys that if an architect draws up a plan for a set of stairs, anybody can build it. Not many people have expertise in it.
Be licensed, expertise?
Well, again, if you're an ornamental shop, you're already an ornamental shop. You make I-beams, you make railings, and so you already have that license necessary. A design professional is the one that draws it up. There's a stamp on from a structural engineer. There's a building permit involved with this vendor that is licensed and insured, overseen by the architect and designer. They two got together, they built this fire escape on the side of a building, and it's probably through, but you've got drawings on there. As a matter of fact, New Jersey put out a how to build a fire escape document, an FTO, I forgot the name, but it's basically, but the sad thing about it, when you look at it, it's information from 1925. So the fire escape is not using 4 or 5 inch flat on the side, it's using 10-inch junior C channels, and it's not using 2 by 2 by quarter angle, it's using 4 by 4 by 3/8 angle. It's like, but thank God at the very end it says, this is just some guidelines on how to build it, like the way we used to build it when we had plenty of free steel back in the 20s or whatever. It says, but if you have an engineer that can skinny this thing up and still stamp it, they'll accept. So you have to build it like this, but if you've never built one, we found this laying around, this is what you can use. Questions? Yes?
Can you comment on where they want to use the metal stringers and womanized wood for the treads?
Okay, so you're talking about, on your code, it says right there that, when you put, it must be made of non-combustible material, or it must match the building type. So every now and then when I'm building a fire escape, and you got it all metal fire escape and somebody wants to use wood that has to be 1.5 inches thick. So it's got to be fire rated. Okay? So does that, and again, the engineer would tell you whether or not it can span a certain amount. But yes, I've seen hybrids. You can actually have an all wood fire escape, but now everything is 1.5 inches thick because it's a wood structure. You can never have a wood structure on a factory because it has to match the building type and be fire rated. Okay? Questions? More? No? Yeah. Now let's talk about welding, right? Here's the problem with welding, so you can understand. Anybody here holding a welding license or certification? Okay, so the biggest issue is that everybody thinks welding became the Band-Aid. So if I have to fix a fire escape, I can either fix it with $3,000 or $30,000. Which one is cheaper for the client? I can either remove the rust or weld over the rust. Guess which one is cheaper for the client? Before anybody sees it, I can paint over everything and silicone shut it so you don't see any of the rust jacking. Which one is cheaper for the client? Which one makes the maximum amount of money? The welding guy that's going to be in and out in a day, or the structural guy that may be there for 10 days? You know what I'm saying? Well, the structural guy's 30 grand. The welding guy is going to be in and out, and you just wrote a violation. And here's what you write on your violations, which always causes a problem. I want you to scrape and paint your fire escape. So when we come and tell him he's got structural issues, do you think that client is not going to reread his violation that you wrote? So never write, ever again, scrape and paint your fire escape on your violation. You must write what the code says. Evaluate, test, or certify your fire escape. They're like, well, what's wrong with it? Well, I see a few things, Trent, but never write what you saw that's wrong, because it'll make us fix only that. You have a violation on your fire escape. I need a certification. I need it evaluated, tested, or certified. Isn't that what the code says? So they can call you a million times and say, what do you mean by evaluation? Well, I'll call a design professional and others acceptable to me. They come in, do an evaluation, put a report to you, give me a copy of the report, hopefully it includes photographs. Well, it's test me. Well, I need to load test it. So if you're going to spot repair your 50 to 75-year-old structure, I'm going to order a load test on you. So make sure your engineer or whoever you bring has information about load testing. Great. What's certification mean? That means if you do a significant amount of repair on your fire escape, what am I going to not order on you? A load test. Okay? So let's talk about welding, and let's talk about Boston. So right now, this is what happens when you weld a fire escape. All fire escapes in the U.S. are bolted and riveted, because when it heats up in the summer, it does this. Because it has a common pin, right? When it cools down in the winter, it does this. So fire escapes were built to breathe and move. Now, when you have a fire escape that all of a sudden gets welded, that used to have a pin, and it heats up in the summer, what does it do? It tries to do this. When it cools down in the winter, it tries to do that. What happens to it? And it starts ripping your weld. Well, how do I know it ripped? Through a costly x-ray or radiograph. If I radiograph that at a huge expense, can I see microscopic ripping in the welds? So were fire escapes ever meant to be welded? So you have a bolt, you take a bolt, what do you put back in? Bolt. Got it? Now when fire escapes do this and move, what happens to the paint they used to have and seal it? It cracks and rips. So when paint that you paint over a fire escape cracks and rips, what happens to it? What does it open it up to do and receive? Not rust. To make rust, you need two things. I need air and water. And as soon as I do this with a fire escape and it rips that paint job I just did on it, what gets in there? One or the other or both. That's where you get corrosion. And that's where corrosion starts. And then, so the bolt that's in there, can I put in the most toughest bolt in the world, or a grade 5, a grade 8, a titanium, some new alloy? Does it really matter about that shaft? Or does it matter that you don't get any jacking? Well, because will jacking rip anything? A good bolt, an old bolt, a titanium bolt, or a grade 5 bolt, will it rip everything? So what really destroys the bolt is not that the bolt gave up on you, is that you were introduced tearing, and so it's ripping the bolt apart, and you introduced rust into it that eats it, so it's being eaten 365 days a year, plus it's getting torn. Got it? So a lot of these welding guys will just go in and weld over the rust, and if there's huge rust, and I'll get you in a second. If there's huge rust there, what do they do? What do they bring with them? 1/2-inch round bars. Because what do you do with those 1/4-inch and half round bars? You lay them over the rust, and now you weld the tread to one side of your bar, and then you weld the round bar to the stringer, and what do you leave underneath it? The rust. A year later, when that rust has grown 1/16 more, just 1/16. What happened to the weld above? It's ripped. When? Usually when you get on it. So this is a great project. This was on an elementary school, kindergarten through 8th grade. They called me during Christmas vacation. And you know who called me? Was it the fire official? Was it the building official? Was it the maintenance man from the building?
Somebody's mom.
The maintenance man from the building. But before I get to the story, tell me what's your question? You got a question?
Oh, I was gonna say, certain aspects of the thing are naturally welded, I mean, they were welded when they were manufactured, so
Correct.
you're kind of comparing, you know, you shouldn't weld where a bolt goes, but if a shred was, you know, welded to the beam, you're re-welding a former weld. That's a difference in putting a bolt back into it. So other than the fact that the EPA doesn't want you using flame or heat to the paint.
Right. But 98% of everything ever built since 1900 is in all mechanical fasteners. The grating was all with a rod and spacers. The way the grating was tied down to something was with a mechanical bolt. There was an angle clip that tied to the side, so everything. Just recently they started introducing some welding in certain components, but now those need to be radiographed or x-rayed, right? So now, you know what I tell them when somebody has a beautifully welded, certified welded bracket? As soon as I put a gusset in here and I put 2 bolts, I keep their weld, and I introduce 2 bolts, do I need to x-ray or load test that weld ever again? And now I'm at 200%, because by adding a bolt gusset to it, what have I done? I've negated the weld. It's still there, I don't get rid of it, I keep it. But to avoid you forcing me into a load test, what do? So I turn a lot of major structural only, not minor. So all the pickets are welded, I don't care. That's taps, you know, with a hammer to see if they're loose. All major structural is what I need to x-ray, test, or verify through certification. So a lot of times I'll negate something. Just like tying into the building that's all cemented there for 75 years. You want me to tear that open just to say it's good? Or right next to it, 6 inches away, I drill a 3/4 hole through the veneer into the block wall, and then I put an 8 to 12 inch epoxy bolt from Hilti, and it has plenty of information, and I just make a mechanical clip back there, keep the cement, repack it and seal it, a new epoxy bolt, and then what do I bring to you? Other evidence of strength. Because you're concerned about this 100-year-old structure that is kind of not looking so great. Well, it doesn't matter to me, I've tied in again. Got it? All right, so let's talk about this weld. You know how everybody welds? So on this school, this is one of the few times it was a 1-story fire escape, and it was so rotted that I actually wanted to keep it as a piece. So I had to save it. Instead of just going down and knocking it all down, I tried to save as much piece as I could. So in some of my classes, I actually would have this fire escape here. So before the show, we can actually look at an actual fire escape, but it's a small dog and pony show, for lack of a better word. But what we did is I showed you all the right things that you can do and all the wrong things that you can do on these fire escapes. So there are some of the answers that they would do. They would grab a fire escape. In the past 5 to 10 years, they put an angle on top because they can't fix it underneath. And what do? They tack weld all the grating, and then they tack weld it to the side. And by the way, did I pull a fire permit on this wood structure that's 100 years old while I'm tacking this whole thing up? Do I ever pull a fire permit? Never. Why? Because it's an accepted Band-Aid. So anybody has a fire escape and you just wrote a violation, you said scraping paint and there's a loose tread, guess who fixes the loose tread? With bolts or with weld? Ever any fire permits? Never. When I'm maintaining a fire escape, I need to pull a permit? Never. When I paint the fire escape, I need to pull a permit? Never. So for 75 years, who's been fixing these things? It should be the ornamental guys and the welding guys because they have some responsibility. But who's really fixing these things? Joe, fix-it guy, you know, florist, part-time landscaper, has some knowledge of the certification on his welding? So this is what it looks like. Now this is actually, I pulled this out of the ground, so all these pieces. Now, you see the bottom one right there? That's typical. When you get there, you don't have to weld from the top. You weld the nose of it the best you can, even though it's full of rust, which this one is. I welded the nose for what reason? Because that's where everybody welds, because that's where all the pressure is. Even though there's rust growing behind it, I weld that nose. How many years is that going to be good for? Is it good for 5, 10 more years? Or is it good for another year maybe? Because as the rust grows 1/16, what happens to that weld on the nose? Got it? So this is the piece. It used to be a 4-foot fire escape. Okay? And that 4-foot fire escape, I shrunk it down to a 2-footer. And then I basically did everything wrong to it so I can bring it to these shows and show how it's done wrong. And by the way, the EPA let me weld on this rusty fire escape, and you notice any paint on this fire escape? So if there was any lead, you know where it's gone? All the little kids ate it at the school, remember? They need something, this was in their recess yard. This fed them out the door to a recess yard. So every day with their little hands going down the railing, what did they do after they went down with their little hands? Put it all over themselves, right? So there's no paint, this is how I found it. This is